Imagine for a moment that you are in prison. You're given a list of rules to follow, and if you don't follow them, the guards come up with horrible punishments for you, like making you clean toilets with your bare hands. Would you obey the rules, or would you rebel? Now take a moment and imagine that you are in charge of running a prison. You're told that you must keep the prisoners in line, but you cannot use physical violence, and you don't have any weapons. How would you keep order? This is a situation that many college students found themselves in during a notorious experiment run by Philip Zimbardo. He was interested in how social roles affect the behaviors of people. That is, how the part people play affects the way they act. What he found was much, much more than that. Zimbardo was a professor at Stanford University in 1971, and he advertised for young men to be part of a 2-week experiment. The 24 men who were selected for the experiment were randomly assigned to be either prisoners or guards. They were then sent into the basement of a building at Stanford University to stay for 2 weeks, while Zimbardo and the researchers monitored them through a video feed. The guards came up with a list of rules for the prisoners to obey. Things like when they could eat, and that they could only be called by their prisoner numbers instead of their names. The guards were told that they could not physically harm the prisoners, but that they could scare them. On the second day, some of the prisoners refused to obey the guards. In retaliation, the guards began to punish the prisoners. But as time went on, the guards' punishment began to get more and more brutal. They deprived the prisoners of sleep and forced them into degrading situations. They made the prisoners clean toilets with their bare hands. The prisoners began to show signs of trauma, including severe depression and anxiety. Several of them cried and acted as though they were close to a nervous breakdown. The researchers had to let several prisoners go early because they were so traumatized. Despite the escalating punishments and the emotional issues displayed by the prisoners, Zimbardo and his colleagues did not discuss stopping the experiment until Zimbardo's then-girlfriend, a graduate student at Stanford, visited the faux prison and saw what was going on. She was horrified and told Zimbardo that he should stop the experiment. Realizing that she was right, Zimbardo pulled the plug on the experiment after 6 days, a week earlier than originally planned. This experiment is often cited as an example of unethical research. The participants suffered psychological pain, and not only the prisoners. Several of the guards felt guilty over their part in the study. Today, the study would not be allowed to be done because it does not meet the ethical guidelines established by the American Psychological Association. Despite the ethical concerns, the Stanford prison experiment has made an impact on the field of psychology. It clearly showed that social roles are a powerful force in human behavior. The guards and prisoners lived as though they were truly guards and prisoners. But it also demonstrated how a situation can influence behavior and attitude. Going into the study, there were no noticeable differences in the subjects. They all came from similar middle-class backgrounds. They were of the same race and gender, and anyone with a history of aggression or trouble with the law was screened out. So what could account for the way the guards and prisoners behaved? Zimbardo's study showed that the situation plays a huge part in people's actions. The study is also an important study in that it helps explain real-world situations in prisons, such as prison guard abuse and prisoner revolt. In 2006, when stories surfaced of the abuse of prisoners at Abu Ghraib military prison, much of the world was shocked. But psychologists familiar with Zimbardo's study sadly knew that that was not an unusual occurrence. Philip Zimbardo led a study known as the Stanford Prison Experiment, in which he randomly assigned subjects to act as either prisoners or guards for 2 weeks. Due to the brutal actions of the guards to keep the prisoners in line, the experiment was stopped a week early. However, the findings of the study and the ethical questions raised by the study continue to have an impact on the field of psychology.